Hey guys, we're the Golden State Readers, a group of students across California working together to fight against book bans. I'm Anais,
I'm Elizabeth. And I'm Karyme.
and today we're here with authors Sarah and Ian Hoffman to discuss book bans and their experiences as authors.
I am Ian Hoffman.
Hello, I am Sarah Hoffman. We are the authors of three books: Jacob's New Dress, Jacob's Room to Choose, and Jacob's School Play, starring he, she, and they. And we have a new book coming out next month called Jacob's Missing Book.
Which is about book banning from a kid's eye point of view.
And we live in San Francisco. We have two kids. They're currently home for the summer.
We have 3 chickens, a rabbit, and a cat,
And bees.
and bees.
Mhm.
40,000 bees.
That's amazing. I love all of that. We are so happy and excited to be here with you guys today. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you
pleasure.
for having us. We love the work that you're doing.
To get started, what was the initial inspiration behind the Jacob series?
So it was our son,
Mhm.
Sam, who's big now, he's 22. But when he was a 2-year-old, he, at first was into trains and tractors and all the things that little boys are often interested in. And one day he surprised us because we took him to a shoe store and, he was this big 2-year-old and we thought we'll give him a choice in what he wears. And we said, Sam, do you want to wear the blue sneakers or the red sneakers? And he said, pink. And we're like, oh, does he not know his colors? But no, he wanted those pink sneakers, like super bad. And he wore them proudly to school. And even though his teacher was kind of scornful about that, he did it. And then he started to be interested in all the things on the quote unquote girl side of the dress up box. So he wanted to wear the flowered hat and the eventually, well, when he was 3, the princess dress up costume, and he wanted pink t-shirts and
Tutus.
yes, tutus. He wanted to go to dance class. He wanted to wear, we found at a thrift store these pink sandals with like sparkly marabou feathers on them. Those were a huge hit at dress up time. And then when he was 4, he asked for a dress to wear for real to school. And so then we're like, okay, this is next level in terms of how the other kids are going to respond. So we found that we were like looking at parenting choices that were different than the other parents around us were having to look at. And our son was looking at social situations that were different than the other kids around him had to experience. And so eventually we found a couple communities of people. One was an online listserv through the Children's National Medical Center in DC. And it was a support group of 350 or so parents from all around the world. And everyone was like the only family in their school or in their classroom or in their neighborhood. And suddenly these parents who were facing these hard questions and these kids who were facing these hard situations had more community. And then we joined an in-person support group put on by Gender Spectrum, which is sadly no longer around. So, there were just so few resources and so few ways to connect with others that I started writing. We had a writing career before that, and I started writing for adults about these kinds of issues.
Yeah, and I was working on children's picture books, and we looked around for a picture book about a boy in a dress to show our son, and they didn't exist. So we decided that we should put our work together and create that thing because it's so empowering for kids to see themselves in a book. So we saw the book as a way to support Sam and kids like him. And we also saw it as a way to support families like ours.
Mm-hmm.
As Sarah said, there's no blueprint for this. We were kind of making it up as we went along.
That's so inspiring. That's so admirable. Yeah, obviously, community is a big important thing. And sometimes you get that through books. So we know, unfortunately, Jacob's New Dress is one of the most banned books of the decade. But can you remember a specific time you saw your book being banned? And what was your reaction?
Vividly.
Yeah, I'll tell it the first time and you can tell how it's gone. So the first time was actually kind of exciting. So we were at a school doing a full day of presentations. We learned our lesson not to do an entire day and evening, but we were presenting to kids K through 8, and then in the evening we were talking to parents and school administrators and teachers, school counselors. So it was this crazy long day, and we went out for our lunch break and we checked our messages, and like our phones had blown up. And we, I guess, had been banned in a school district in North Carolina. And, the New York Times was calling for a statement. And it was like, it was kind of thrilling. It was like, oh, we're going to be in the New York Times, and maybe more people will know about our book, and maybe it'll have an effect on sales. Like, this is kind of cool. And we were proud for years to, be number 73 on the
Number 72.
72. Number 72. Sorry, who's 73?
Lolita is 73.
On the ALA's most banned books of the decade. Now, this is an outdated list because it was from 2020, so it will be very interesting to see where things stand now. But, we were proud of that. And then, like 3 years ago, 3 years ago,
Three.
things started getting really, really twisted.
Yeah, we live in a much more hostile world in terms of book banning right now. As you guys know, because you do this work, and I probably don't have to walk you through the statistics, but book bans go up about 300 to 400% year over year for the last 3 years. And it's gone from something that happens to us occasionally and raises awareness of our books to happening all the time. We're banned in like 26 states in Malaysia. The Malaysia thing always puzzles us because who reads our books in Malaysia?
Right, they're not translated.
Well, I mean, I know I can imagine at least it's jarring seeing your book being banned for the first time, and I assume it doesn't get any less upsetting and jarring as time goes on.
Looking at individual bans at this point, and now it's like, big groups, and we know we're not alone. I mean, there's so many authors who are facing this now.
Also, it's not like there's a list of banned books. PEN America and the ALA compile lists of banned books, but we only find out when we get Google alerts with our book title in them that we've been banned somewhere. So it has to be reported on somewhere. The information is very incomplete and murky.
And one last thing I'll say is there was recently a hoopla in a town called Denton, Texas, which is outside of Dallas. And there's was it a school board member?
Someone was running for school board on the platform of having 2 of our books banned.
Like that was her whole platform.
Whole
And there were all these hearings, and they went on for hours, and people saying nonsense about our books. And we got a call from one student reporter, and he's the only person who sounds like he'd actually read the book. So we were impressed. He had legitimate questions, but the coverage was so ridiculous because they're talking about this book like it's, an issue of Penthouse in children's hands. I mean, it was wild.
Yeah, and all that footage was recorded, so we actually got to watch it, not just what was on ABC or NBC on the news broadcast, but the actual, school board hearing. And there'd be people holding up our book and, saying all these things about it. And clearly they had not read any of it.
Yeah.
Which was really kind of fascinating to watch.
Yeah.
But if you hadn't read it, if I hadn't read any of it and I was listening to this person talking about it, they'd sound pretty convincing.
Yeah, my own mother called and said, what do you think about how they're teaching sex in kindergarten? It's like, they're not teaching sex in kindergarten. They're reading books like our books to help kids accept themselves and each other. That is all that is happening. So anyway, the point about Denton, Texas is not that it's even an interesting story. It's that this is what is going on over and over and over with thousands and thousands of children's books across the country all the time.
I mean, that shocks me, but also doesn't surprise me that they didn't even read the book, because I know that happens a lot. But with children's books, especially, it would take them 5 seconds to look through it.
That's what we always say. It's like, take 4 minutes out of your day, read the book.
That to me that astounds me. But I mean, yeah, that happens all the time, unfortunately. But then, so knowing your books might be banned while you're writing them, how do you kind of balance that anticipated response with the representation and content you still want to put out? And do you have any specific considerations about your content when you're writing for a younger audience?
Yeah, good question. So most of the responses to our books are positive, like parents, teachers, librarians, school counselors, therapists tell us how much our books have meant to their kids and to their families. And our focus is on supporting kids. We write to help kids who are a little different from their peers. And we write to help their peers understand these kids and for everybody to have a more accepting worldview. So the knowing that it will be banned or anticipating it will be banned isn't really part of our thinking as we're writing. That's not our audience.
Yeah, I mean, it's challenging to talk about book banning in a way that's appropriate for a kindergartner because there is a lot of grown-up politics that is going on behind book bans. In general, we believe as children's book authors that it's possible to find an age-appropriate way to explain most things in the world to a 5-year-old. And so our approach is to center kids' points of views when we write. And so for the newest book, Jacob's Missing Book, we wanted to approach this complicated adult topic from a kid's perspective. So they might not know what's going on in the adult world. I mean, a lot of adults might not know what's going on in the adult world, but they do have a sense of how it's affecting them, like how it's manifesting in their own world.
Yeah. Jacob goes to look for his book, and he doesn't know what a book ban is or hasn't heard about it, but his book is missing from the library. And he asks the librarian, and the librarian's in the terrible situation of being like a professional dealing with a kid that and legally not being allowed to talk about what's going on.
Yeah.
And fumbling through it.
Yeah, and we let the adults fumble in this case so that the kids could focus on creating their own response, their own solution, that how they puzzled through this idea, this conflict on their own.
They find out the book has been removed and they still don't understand what's going on. Like, if you were a kid, like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
Like, and how would you feel about it if it was important to you, that book? And like, what do kids say to each other when they're trying to make up stories to understand the things that are going around them that they don't understand?
Yeah, and there's not like a satisfying answer right now, because like as adults we haven't solved this problem yet, or we haven't fully solved it yet, and kids aren't going to technically solve this problem yet. But the solution that they come up with has to do with finding and telling their own stories. And we feel like that is something everybody can do, that we still have the power to do. They can take away our books, but they cannot take away our ability to tell stories.
Also, like, kids are magic that way, the way they come up with stories and the way they're constantly inventive and the way they reframe things in ways that we don't expect. And so we kind of wanted to tap into that magic a little bit as we wrote this book.
And I will give Ian credit for being the person in our home who is most childlike and tends to be able to tap into that energy and that kind of thinking. Plus, we run everything by our kids who are closer to being young. And I guess the last thing we should say is that we've never shied away from conflict.
Yeah.
Although I will say in our first book, I didn't like that we had to put in a conflict around gender. I wanted to put in a conflict around something else. Like, there's just this boy in a dress, and that's fine with everyone. And they go solve some problem, like, oh, a missing book. I guess it's there. I guess we got there 4 books later. Yeah. So, but the truth is that kids, they face conflicts every day. They might face a little conflict, like, I want cereal for breakfast and my mom wants me to eat eggs, or big things like someone's being mean to me on the playground, or monumental things that we don't even want to imagine that kids are having to face. And what we try to do with our books is create a world that's actually recognizable to kids, that has some of the conflict that they experience. And we want to be thoughtful about like what power kids actually do have to make a difference in their own lives, even when the adults are doing impossibly silly, insane seeming things.
Yeah, we really make a point of not wanting to talk down to our audience and like respect them. And kids know the difference when you're talking down to them.
I really, really value that perspective on everything. That's such an important thing. I think people in general just need to remember that kids are just little adults, or they're just little humans. They're not items or beings you need to talk down to. But I just want to say, I know I have Jacob's Missing Book from the ALA book signing that you guys did.
Oh, great.
And it is so masterfully done. I was sitting there just like, oh, this is so sweet. I love this book so much the entire time. I know, I think I read on FaceTime with Anais and Karyme. So
can I get you to blurb our book? That was great.
That was really good.
I just want to like play that over and over.
Maybe just we could listen to it as a meditation when we go to sleep.
But it was just masterfully done. I was very impressed and I loved it so much. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. And a shout out to our illustrator, Chris Case, who's done all the books, but we just feel like he's getting better and better. Plus he's a really great guy who we adore working with, and we get to work with a lot more than the typical writer-illustrator relationship because our publisher is awesome. So we're super lucky. He's done a great job with this one, with all of them.
You mentioned that most of the reactions to the book you get are positive. So can you share some of your favorite reactions that you may have gotten?
So my favorite reaction is one that happened really early on, and it's that some parent reaches into their pocket and they pull out their phone and they open up photos and they turn their phone around and there's a picture of their little boy in a dress holding our book with a big smile on their face.
Yeah.
Like every time that happens, they get all teary. It's really like, yeah, I know, I'm tearing too, just thinking about it because it's so meaningful that like something we've made is having some positive impact on some child we've never met and will probably never meet. Like that's an extraordinary thing to have happen.
Yeah, our parents will come up to us like in an assembly environment and point out their kid, and they get teary there, and it means a lot. And talking to librarians is just huge for us. Like being at the ALA and getting feedback from librarians and hearing their stories. We had this one librarian tell us, I can't remember where she was from, the one who the book keeps going missing. So the books weren't banned, but these, I guess her library is sort of a cross between a public library and a homeschool support environment for a largely Christian homeschool population. And so their act of civil disobedience is to remove books like ours from the shelves and hide them. Like they might bury them in, adult nonfiction or whatever. And so this librarian, what she does is she looks for these books that go missing. And A, she finds them, and B, she tells her head librarian she's buying 2 queer books for every one that goes missing. She said, I'm queering up the place. So we get these like amazing stories like that. Writing is solitary in a way. We're lucky to have each other, but unless we're at the ALA, we're not talking to a million librarians at once, so that's really kind of wonderful.
You talked about like the picture of the little boy in the dress holding up the book. That made me get teary too. That's such a unique image.
Right? Or teachers will tell us, I have this one kid and he needs this book. And when we brought this book in, he, a light came into his days, like just that's the kind of stuff that keeps us ticking.
Yeah, obviously we know that book banning is not the best way to approach these situations, but we just want to get your take on in what ways do you think book banning affect our society?
I mean, the last decade has seen actually a really extraordinary rise in diverse books of all kinds. So
yeah, the whole We Need Diverse Books movement has really made a huge impact in publishing, and it's a very positive impact. And it's been, it started small and it just got bigger and bigger, and the books got better and better and more diverse. And
yeah,
it's been wonderful to watch.
Yeah, so there's just been this explosion of the kinds of books that are out there for kids. So if you're a child of color, or you are gender diverse, or you have a medical condition, or you have a limb difference and use a crutch. Like I'm thinking of this particularly beautiful book that we just read by James and Lucy Catchpole. It's called You're So Amazing. Handles disability issues impeccably. But there's a million books like this now. And so, I mean, I use that figuratively. I hope there's a million.
Someday.
There's just so many different wonderful books that can reflect your experience. And we know that the books that are getting banned, especially right now, are books by and about people of color and LGBTQ people. So those are kids who, in the 26 states that are currently banning children's books in earnest, and a few isolated spots in many other states, these kids don't have access to the books that are reflecting their realities. And without that access, they are more isolated. So it affects these kids who are different, but it also affects these kids who are more typical, who aren't different in some special way, or have one form of difference, but don't know how to interact with kids with other forms of difference, because those kids don't have these tools to learn about difference, accepting people around you who are different than you. And, our goal is creating a broader culture of kindness where people can be themselves and be accepted for who they are. And so when books like ours get banned, that's by people who are not sharing this priority, is, I guess, the nice way we could put it.
And other priorities.
Yeah. But here's the thing. I mean, society has made such progress in the last, 2 decades, like unbelievable progress. And We Need Diverse Books has made such progress in the last decade. And I don't think that you can go back on these things. I think this is backlash, and that sucks. And this is hard, but we're going to figure our way out of it. It feels like a setback and a big old one, but the haters can't change that these books exist and that they have existed, even if you can't get them right now in Florida, or you're scared to bring it into your classroom in Florida because you'd be fined and fired.
It all seems ridiculous to me, especially when I read books like yours and I'm just reading it being like, I don't know what part of this people would take issue with, but I guess people are finding things. But what are the main reasons people cite when they're trying to ban your books?
This political moment has been hijacked by a small group of very wealthy, very conservative extremists, and they're leveraging their money and the reach of social media. Groups like Moms for Liberty, we don't know how they're funded, but suddenly they're everywhere. And they've got chapters everywhere. And so they tell the people who are interested in working with them what to say about our books and what books to target and how to target them. And it's like a little army.
Yeah, and there's too many for them to read. They don't read them. They just try and get them banned.
Right, reading the books is not the issue.
We talked to Maya Kobabe, who's probably the most banned author right now, and one of their books was banned in a library, and it was like Long Beach. It was down close to where you guys are from.
Yeah.
And the librarian called Maya to say, we didn't have your book. Someone ordered it. And then the day it came in, they banned it. So
yeah, they challenged it the day it came in. So it was like a setup, very
right?
deliberate.
So that person didn't have to read Maya's book and probably never will. Also, teens who that book is meant for and young adults will not also now be able to access that book in that library. So the technique that they're using for books like Maya's and ours and so many others is, I guess, in a word, lying. Right? So
I was wondering where you're going with that. Lying.
you distill this. Because they say that our book contains pornography, right? I mean, anyone can read it. Well, anyone who has access to it can read it. We, thankfully in California, you can all go take the books out of your library and decide for yourselves if they contain porn. I don't know if our word is any good, but they don't. The kinds of language that objectors are now using since this organized political situation is kind of extraordinary. So like if
you had one earlier, do you have that handy?
Oh, the Amazon review?
Yeah.
Okay, so
I was reading one to me today.
We went to speak at the Brooklyn Public Library. We had some downtime, so I'm like, look at our Amazon reviews for our first book, which I had not done probably since it came out. I don't know what prompted me, but these reviews had changed from, in the beginning, they were like 80% positive, 20% negative. And the negative ones were like, you shouldn't teach this stuff to kids. Like you're going to make them gay and, just sort of ignorant stuff for the most part. But in the last 3 years, these reviews are like completely flipped. The majority of them are negative and they're using all this crazy language. So like we are writing filth and porn and indoctrinating children. And one reviewer said they're inappropriate for anyone under 18. Woke propaganda is a very common phrase we will hear. They say we're groomers. They say we're evil. And here's the one that Ian was referring to. It was titled By Degenerates for Degenerates.
That's us.
Yeah. Also, that's you too, because we wrote it for you. Another vile, steaming pile of demonic crap cranked out by the degenerate class for all the 30 IQ successfully brainwashed adherents of the new leftist orthodoxy. And I'll paraphrase here because what he said was, I take great pleasure in telling my children every week that, I return to the quote, there are indeed evil people in the world, and I use examples like Jacob's new dress to illustrate this stark reality for his children every week.
It doesn't affect us personally, but the strategy behind doing this on Amazon is that we can get fewer stars for the negative reviews, which tanks our popularity. So when you search for a book, ours comes up less frequently.
Yeah, and we offer you this as, again, less our personal story and more the groups like Moms for Liberty, and I think there's about 4 of them. They're targeting thousands of authors, right? And so they have these little minions going out into the world with all these strategies. So they're showing up at school board meetings, they're running for school board, they're objecting to books, they're tanking people's reviews on Amazon, they're reporting people to Facebook and saying their profiles are pornographic or other stuff. We once
This
had
happened to us.
Yeah, it was different. They tried to say get us taken down for copyright infringement, which was weirdly successful, which is very strange because we own our own copyright. But they have all these sinister methods that they're actually very good at. I mean, I have to admire the organizing effort for sure.
That's wild. Yeah, I think we were all speechless while you were reading that review.
Oh, that's just
My mouth just
one. I mean, we're
dropped.
kind of used to it now.
Yeah, no, that was insane. I just was at a loss for words. Oh my God. Well, how do you think viewers at home should help bring awareness to and help combat censorship?
It's all about showing up, really. I mean, it's about if you're a parent going to school board meetings and see what's happening. It's about checking in with the teachers that you like and ask them what's going on and seeing if they need support. It's checking in with your librarians to find out if there are book bans or if they're under pressure to do anything, and telling them that you're there to support them and ask them like what you can concretely do to support them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, the ALA and Pen America have some pretty amazing resources. There's actually a great page up right now on the ALA website, guiding people on things like reporting challenges to them and also reporting challenges to the Office for Intellectual Freedom. That's actually this really cool office that everyone should know about. They have a fairly big staff dedicated to investigating civil rights violations. And because they understand that these book bans can create a hostile climate for children of color and LGBTQ kids of any stripe or kids who have a two-mom family or et cetera. So they know that these bans are creating a culture of racism and homophobia and transphobia, and they are actively going after these violations, which is one of the few things in this whole situation that really tickles me. I love the Office for Intellectual Freedom. Check them out. So there's a ton of Banned Books Week and Banned Books Month activities going on with the ALA. We've been passing out a handout. We can email to anyone. We should put it up on our website. It's basically organizations that we support and that anyone can support with their time or their money. Organizations that are either directly fighting book bans or they are fighting the forces behind book bans, right? Because that's really the complicated grown-up stuff that we need to be putting our money and our volunteer time toward. I mean, voting rights and stopping gerrymandering, and racial justice and economic justice and all the issues that are behind it. So
feels funny to be talking about these issues to these people who are actually doing the work.
Yes, yes.
You guys are doing it.
Listeners, for anyone, there's a lot that we can do to contribute to the effort. And I guess the last thing we should say, because we encourage kids and grown-ups to do it, is to tell your stories. So talk about what you're experiencing. It's less of an issue here in California, but in other places, if you're affected by book bans, using which you all are doing so effectively, is using whatever your mouthpiece is. You're so good about spreading the message on social media. Whatever an individual's particular mouthpiece is, use it and speak up, because we think that stories change the world. That could be our tagline.
Stories change the world.
We'll send it out to you guys. We'll send it out to you guys. This might be repetitive, but are there any changes you would like to see in communities on how they respond to what's deemed controversial literature?
I think there's one really important point that tends to get lost in the whole discussion about controversial literature. So many of the books that are banned are, some of the best books ever written in America. We've got authors like Alice Walker and Mark Twain and Isabel Allende and Vladimir Nabokov. And, seriously, we're honored to be on a list with them, any list. And literature is called controversial because it makes people think, which is what schools, I think, are supposed to do, right? Make people think and learn. And it's important to remember that books that are in school classrooms, books that are in school libraries, books that are used in school curricula, were selected by teachers and librarians who are the people we trust with our children. And there are plenty of opportunities for parents to get involved in the creation of school curricula. And if they want to. And but you know, these are people who do this for a living and they care about children. They don't go into this job for the money, believe me. And parents are welcome to choose what their own children read, but parents shouldn't be allowed to choose what other families' children can read. And you know, there's a line there. And at this point, we've really kind of crossed it. You know, the Washington Post did a in-depth investigative article about a year ago, June, on 1,000 book bans. And they looked into, like, they pulled all the records of it. Who challenged the book? Where was it challenged? Do they have kids in the school district? Why did they challenge it? You know, they really did the field work on it. And what they discovered was that 60% of the book bans of challenges were filed by 11 people. So that's like 11 people telling
the whole world what to
so
think.
the whole world what to think, right? It's not a groundswell of support for book banning.
That's wild. Yeah, it makes total sense based on what we've seen so far. I mean,
Yeah.
in these that we've been looking at these past few years as we've all been involved in this advocacy work. But that being said, do you have any advice or words of inspiration for young readers or even young writers or teachers facing these challenges?
Well, elaborate on what I just said. Book bans are unpopular with the overwhelming majority of Americans. 70% of Americans are against book bans, which, you know, if you follow politics or current events at all, is more people agree on that than on any other issue in this country right now.
Yeah. And back to what we were talking about the roots of this movement and pulling threads from earlier, we all have stories to tell, and try as they might, they can't stop people from sharing those. And since there's more of us who don't support book bans than there are of them who do, if we all speak up in our own ways, whatever that looks like, we can be heard. And that's how change happens. And we actually find that to be a pretty hopeful thought, which is sometimes amusing to think that we could have hopeful thoughts amid all of this, but it is actually very hopeful.
I mean, this interview was just so amazing. All of you guys' answers were so insightful. I mean, that's all the questions that we have, but is there anything else that you guys would like to add?
We're just really grateful for your work. I think,
yeah, we're just blown away by you guys. We're so impressed that you decided to do this and are actually doing it like in a thoughtful and organized way. It's really great.
yeah, let's take them down together.
Thank you so much for this interview.
Yeah, thanks again for this. And again, let us know if there's anything we can do to support your work, any sharing, anything you can think of.
Yes,
Yeah, thank you for taking the time.
Nice to meet you all.
It was so
Yes,
nice.
great to meet you guys.
Great interview. You guys are so inspiring. Love
Aw.
what you guys do, especially like your
Thank
book
you.
series. It's
Bye.
bye. Enjoy your day.
Bye.